Joyland in Wichita, Kansas was a small amusement park that ended up with a long history of accidents, bad press, and one of the most brutal killings the city had ever seen, a man impaled by a group of teens sneaking in after hours. Brandywine Springs in Delaware was a cozy little park until a rejected man showed up with a firearm, took the lives of 2 people, and tried to burn the place to the ground. And Holy Land, USA in Connecticut was supposed to be a tribute to faith, but after it shut down and fell into decay, something incredibly disturbing happened there. These are abandoned theme parks with disturbing backstories. First up is Joyland Amusement Park, which was anything but joyful. This one opened in 1942 in Wichita, Kansas. Originally, it was a pretty limited setup. There were just a few rides, but it expanded over the years to include bumper cars, carnival games, a haunted house, and the park hosted outdoor concerts and festivals too. For a while, it was the go-to summer spot in the area, but for all the fun that happened there, the park was also the site of some extremely dark moments. The most disturbing was the death of Michael King. He was a man who'd confronted 4 teenagers for sneaking into the park after hours. What happened next was beyond brutal. The teens attacked him, and he ended up getting impaled and left to die. 2 of the attackers were underage and avoided charges. The other 2 were tried and convicted. But even with the crime hanging over the park, Joyland didn't close. But trouble kept following. Over the years, there were a number of accidental deaths. One person reportedly fell off a roller coaster. Another worker was crushed while doing maintenance. Standard carnival horror stories, sure, but when they start piling up, it's hard not to think the place was cursed. Eventually, after yet another tragedy, this time someone falling to their death from the Ferris wheel, Joyland was starting to feel the negative effects of its increasingly negative reputation. Insurance became a nightmare, attendance dropped, and finally in 2004, the park shut down. For years the place sat empty, rotting in the Kansas sun. Rides were rusting, graffiti covered every surface. But then in 2018, a couple named Gregory and Tina Dungan bought the grounds with plans to turn it into an event venue for concerts, traveling carnivals, and weddings. Because nothing says eternal love like saying your vows at the sight of multiple deaths and one very infamous killing. I mean, what kind of wedding playlist do you even put together for something like that? Next up, we have Brandywine Springs in Wilmington, Delaware. This one might just be the oldest theme park on the list. It was open from 1886 to 1923. Not much of it is left today. It's mostly just a park with walking trails and a few markers, but back in the day, Brandywine Springs was a pretty happening place. There was a wooden roller coaster, a train that looped around the grounds, and a place called the Castle House, which was kind of the central attraction. It wasn't on the scale of Disneyland, obviously, but for its time, it was a pretty magical little spot. But not everything about the park was family friendly. In 1916, Brandywine Springs was the scene of a violent crime. A man named Samuel Gungus had become obsessed with Catherine Bodicki, a waitress who worked at the park's restaurant. Catherine did not return Samuel's feelings. She rejected him, and he did not take this well, which is a major understatement. By didn't take it well, I mean he completely snapped. He showed up one day in a fit of rage and shot both Catherine and her friend, Aretty Nichols, who'd had the bad luck of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Gungus wasn't done. He tried to burn the whole park down. He set fire to the restaurant, the photo gallery, the nearby concession stands. It was a full-on arson spree. That day definitely marked a turning point, but the park limped along for a few more years. Eventually, though, it closed for good in 1923. Now it's just this quiet, wooded area where people jog and walk their dogs, but some say they've seen things there, shadowy figures in the early morning fog, and supposedly the area near where the old restaurant was always feels colder than the rest of the park. There used to be a theme park called Holy Land, USA in Waterbury, Connecticut. It was abandoned for a while, having closed in 1984, but in 2014 it actually reopened, and it's now open to the public during daylight hours. For a while, though, it was just a decaying skeleton. It was originally built as a religious theme park in the 60s. There were miniature versions of famous biblical landmarks like a tiny Jerusalem, small-scale temples, and statues of angels and saints scattered around the hills. It attracted thousands of Christian tourists back in the day, but by 1984 the park fell into disrepair and it was shut down. Nature started taking over that and vandals, and for a long time it looked like a war zone with rusting structures and crumbling statues, shattered glass everywhere. But then came a real horror story. In 2010, two teenagers, Chloe Ottman and Francisco Cruz, decided to sneak into the abandoned park. Now, this wasn't anything unusual. Lots of people had done it before. Chloe and Francisco were friends. They knew each other through school and church, and there was no reason for her to feel unsafe. But that night, something changed. Francisco made unwanted advances. When Chloe turned him down, he snapped. He forced himself on her, then killed her before dragging her body into the woods. Eventually he confessed though, and police found Chloe's body. Francisco was sentenced to 55 years in prison. Next up, we head all the way over to Japan with Kejonuma Leisure Land. If you've ever wanted to visit a theme park haunted by a ghost woman and her serpentine offspring, well, this is the spot. Kejonuma Leisure Land opened sometime in the 70s and stayed open for over 2 decades before shutting down in 2000. It was a modest park by most standards, nothing too flashy here, but it had all the basics: a Ferris wheel, go-karts, swan boats, and some children's rides. The land around the park was gorgeous too. Thick forest and hills, a pond that locals said had a strange energy about it. That's where the legend begins. It's said that long ago, a beautiful woman lived by the pond. She got pregnant, but when she gave birth, what came out wasn't human. It was a creature, a twisted serpentine thing that slithered back into the pond and disappeared under the water. That night, the woman started to hear crying. It was soft at first, but it got louder and louder as the days went on. It was infant cries, wailing. Every single night, the sound came back, driving her deeper and deeper into madness. Sleep became almost impossible, and instead of trying to start over somewhere new, she decided to end it all. She walked into the pond and drowned herself, but not before cursing the land. And ever since, people say the grounds are cursed. Even after the theme park was built, workers reported strange things happening. Tools going missing, sudden drops in temperature, and sounds coming from the woods. Visitors claimed to hear splashing in the pond even when it was completely still. And some swore they saw something long and snake-like gliding just under the water. Today, what's left of the park is this rusted Ferris wheel and a few rotting buildings, but those who visit say the energy there still feels wrong. And we're finishing off with Nara Dreamland again in Japan. Now, unfortunately, this place has been demolished, but for a long time it sat completely abandoned, and urban explorers would share some rather creepy stories about the place, but I'll get to that in a minute. First, the backstory. Nara Dreamland was a theme park in Nara, the capital city of Nara Prefecture. It opened in 1961 and stayed open for decades. It finally shut down in 2006. It couldn't afford to stay open anymore because attendance kept dropping, especially once Tokyo Disneyland opened in the 80s. Basically stole the spotlight. Why go for the knockoff when you can go for the real thing? But Nara Dreamland was no small operation. The place was massive. I'm talking a small village size here. It had a Main Street style entrance, a castle, a monorail, and a Jungle Cruise knockoff. It sat abandoned for over 10 years and it was finally demolished in 2017. There's something especially eerie and sad about abandoned theme parks in general. I mean, these are places that are literally built to be filled with people. Everything is made to be an overload to the senses. Larger than life, cartoony statues, colorful signs, cheerful music pumped through speakers. You're supposed to walk through hearing laughter, roller coasters, and screams. So when these places are dead silent, paint is peeling, the metal is rusting, and vines are growing through what used to be gift shops. It's eerie to say the least, and it doesn't help that urban explorers would claim to hear strange sounds near the park's old boat ride. Some said they heard splashing, even though the water had long since dried up. Others said they'd see shadowy figures ducking behind buildings or moving just out of frame in their photos. One explorer even swore they saw the silhouette of a person standing perfectly still at the top of the rusted roller coaster, only for it to vanish when they looked again. With all that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.
These haunted hospitals will send a chill down your spine. Unexplained encounters have left even the most enthusiastic paranormal investigators lost for words. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium, now Waverly Hills Sanatorium, located in Louisville, Kentucky, was open to house the growing number of tuberculosis patients. Due to a lack of medical knowledge at the time, patients were kept outside year-round for fresh air, and many had their lungs surgically removed. It is known as one of the most haunted places on Earth, with countless reports of paranormal activity. One person actually shared their experience working there and said, "I worked in the sanatorium for a while, and a lot of residents always, claim to hallucinate either small dogs or, either eating ice cream before they pass away. It's always facility specific too. This place I worked at, I've had about 6 or 7 residents claim to see a little girl eating ice cream and then they pass on later that night. That seems too coincidental for me, right?"